July 21st, 1923, I was born at home on Pinehurst Street in Detroit. My parents moved to Dundee for 3 years while my dad worked at Ypsilanti because it was a shorter distance to travel.
Was that for Ford Motor?
Uh,
Was it for Ford Motor?
yeah. And then we moved to Stedman. And I don't know the number, it's across Bourne Avenue. You can find it. I could find it. And then we moved to 6142 Yinger. This was a big old house, had 9 rooms, and they bought it for $2,500 in East Dearborn, 1 block off of Greenfield. My grandparents never lived in Dearborn. They lived in Detroit. And Grandpa had a confectionery store, which is like an ice cream and candy store.
This is your mom's parents.
Jefferson Avenue, downtown Detroit.
This is your mom's parents.
Yes. Grandma and Grandpa Martin. Then he bought the 2 farms because he was quite wealthy. He bought 2 farms in Dundee. One we lived in, okay? One we lived in Dundee. They lived there all the time. The other one he rented out, and the guy farmed it.
Like a tenant farmer.
Right.
What, do you know the street that was on those farms?
The one we lived in was on Main Street, Riley Street, going to the cemetery. Dundee was a town that had many parades, and it had a big bandstand in the middle of the town. And everything started there, and it marched down Riley Street to the cemetery. My grandfather bought 5 lots at the cemetery, and that's why he, Eli, Pearl, Zella, and Nelson, my mother and dad, are buried there. There's one more lot that was supposed to be for my brother Nelson. Grandpa lost his money when the banks crashed during the Depression, and he was allowed to keep the house that we lived in, the farm, and now it's US 23. That Riley Street had 4 churches, different
Denomination?
yeah, denominations, and we went to the Methodist church, and everything was centered around Riley Street. We had the bandstand every Friday night. All the people came to town to buy their groceries for the next week, and a lot of us kids met in the ice cream parlor, and they always had a band that played in the bandstand. We used to go into town to the ice cream store we were always a family together. And then I used to go to the farm after we moved to Dearborn on vacations as a child in the summertime. So that's how I had friends that I, went to Dundee High School from kindergarten to 12th grade. This is Aunt Thelma, my dad's younger sister. Dad was the oldest, then Aunt Marion, then Thelma, and Irving, his brother who died of TB, and Eunice. This is a picture of my grandpa's horse and buggy. He and Grandma are sitting in the carriage, and my mother is holding the horse. And this was downtown Detroit. I don't know exactly where, but they had the confectionery store, so I assume it was around Jefferson Avenue. We had the men who came around the streets, knife sharpener, fruit man, J.L. Hudson's, Crowley Millers, the egg man, and Twin Pines milkman who stopped at our house every day. My father lived in Detroit, and he was in the Marine Corps in World War I. And then when he came out, at 19 or 20 years old, he went to work at Ford Motor Company. He was a great mechanic. He was the superintendent of the motor building on Miller Road. And he fixed cars in the yard. He'd buy old cars, fix them, and sell them to increase the income. My mother, Zella, was a very great woman. She did lots of things like sewing, crocheting. She made afghans, and for everybody in the family. She was a great pianist, and she and I used to sing. We used to go to the Haller's house every Sunday, Grandma Haller's, and have dinner, and then sing-alongs where my mother played, and all the Hallers were great singers. So we used to harmonize, and Mother and myself used to sing duets at church, mother and daughter banquets. What else? This is a picture of my mom as a baby. And this is the house she was born in Barberton, Ohio. Mom had kidney problems, kidney stones all the time, which some of you have inherited. But they took one kidney out, and she lived to be 78 years old with one kidney, which was remarkable in those days.
And did she die of kidney failure?
No, she had a heart attack. We used to go downtown Detroit every week, my mother and I. We drove the car to Michigan and Schaefer, parked it, got on the bus, and rode the rest of the way downtown. And we used to shop at Crowley Miller's, J.L. Hudson's, and go to the theaters, the Fox, the Michigan, and have lunch at Greenfield's cafeteria, which was a big thrill. Mom had this girlfriend that she was very close with. She went to a business training school in Detroit. I can't remember the name of it, but it's still there, I think. And her girlfriend's name was Gladys. She set my dad and mom up for their first date, and they went dancing at Grandy Ballroom on Grand River, and it was upstairs, a big ballroom. And that's how they met. This is a picture of my brother Nelson and myself. And it's the only baby picture we have of us. It costs too much money to have your pictures taken, and you had to go to the studio. The first school I attended was Robert Oakman, and I was 4.5 years old, and I came out the wrong door when it was time to go home, and I got lost. So that's my memory of Robert Oakman. And later I went to Lorry School for about a year, and I went to Maples Junior High when we moved to Yinger. It was called Junior High, but I went from kindergarten through 9th grade. And then we went to Fortson. When we were at Maples, we had a coach called George Sarkozy. He had a ping pong paddle with holes drilled in it that he swatted you on the butt. Whether you were a girl or a boy, didn't matter to him. And a lot of teachers used to make you stand up in front of the class with gum on into your nose if you were chewing gum in the class. Jim said that was corporal punishment. So, girl at Maple School, I was a cheerleader. I ran track. I got my letter M, varsity letter, although we only went to the 9th grade, but I was a 50-yard dash. And that's how it got my M. I learned how to ice skate as a young kid because that's what we did for recreation, but mostly I was a roller skater. And I used to even dance on roller skates. But now I'm a klutz. We used to go to Middle Belt and Schoolcraft. There was a big white barn with a big red barn, and they had horses that you rented. And we used to go down the middle of the Schoolcraft. They had an island that went down the middle, and that's where we used to horseback ride, other than Dundee. And I loved horseback riding until I married my husband, and he took a switch and hit the horse on the bottom, and the horse took off, and I ended up in the barn. My oldest memory was when we were visiting Grandma Martin, and Nelson, my brother, set fire to the big haystack between the two barns. And we were running with buckets of water trying to put it out. My first kiss was at a party, and we were playing Spin the Bottle. And that's when I got kissed by a boy.
How old were you?
10 or 11 years old. When I was 7 years old, I had a beautiful dress that was my favorite. It had a beige satin top and a brown velvet bottom and a little bolero jacket, brown velvet. And I wore that every place. I wore it to my grandpa's funeral, I wore it to parties, I wore it wherever. Going to the swing bowl on the weekends, and then as I got a little older, we used to go every night. It was a fearless beer garden with a jukebox that played all the songs, and we used to jitterbug and drink cherry cokes. The first time I went on an airplane, I was about 45, and I went to visit my brother and his wife in Florida. And from then on, I went every year. Flew down, and then Chuck would drive down and bring me back a month later. Another thing, my doctor was in the Penobscot building on the 23rd floor. And if you know how I hate elevators, I used to go there once a month when I got married. When I lived 2 blocks from Ford Road on Yeaner Street, we kids used to go through the woods, which is now a park, Ford Park, to Henry Ford's house. And he had the barn set up with hay that we could jump in, swings, and he used to come and visit and bring us apples every time he came, and talk with us and play with us. Old man Henry. And there were big gardens on the other side of Ford Road in Greenfield. Every Ford employee could have a garden for his family. The only thing they had to do was buy the seed and keep the weeds out. That was all vacant property, and now it's law. There were big white farmhouses from Greenfield to Southfield, and they were all torn down and all put up. When we went to the barn, and Henry Ford came every day with a bushel of apples, and he would teach us to shake hands with him and have an apple as a reward for whatever he told us to do. The University of Michigan and what is our junior college is.
And that's
Henry Ford's home is right in that area.
the Fairlane Mansion.
Right. I remember, he was a great, great old man. And I remember when he died in his home in West Dearborn, we had a terrible flood and no help could get in, and he couldn't get out to go to the doctor to get help. Oh, I played softball in Dearborn before I was married and after I was married. I had a Model A car that Chuck bought me that I picked up the girls, and we played all around Dearborn. We played Chuck's friends in Farmington. They were called the Farmington Flyers. We were just the Dearborn bunch, and I played pitcher. And I was a good hitter.
Slow pitch or fast pitch?
No, slow pitch. Not slow pitch, just pitch. We didn't have, these real fast. How I met Chuck. I knew him in high school. He was 2 years ahead of me, and he was a big athlete, big star, very handsome. And all the girls knew him, but he had a girlfriend. And I really met him at my Grandma Haller's house, 7 Mile and Inkster Road. She lived in a big farmhouse on the corner, and Chuck lived 1 block across 7 Mile down from my grandparents. And he got to know them and talk with them, and so when I went there for vacation with my cousin Jerry, I met Chuck, and I made a date with him and another guy named Jerry for the same night because Chuck didn't have a car. And so we went to Farmington and to a free movie. They used to show free movies on Friday nights, and we used to go there to the free movie, and they had a carnival. And he and this guy were racing each other to see who could win a prize for me. The other guy did. I was married June the 7th, 1941. I was married at Greenfield Village, Martha Mary Chapel, at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. We had a little disaster that when we were going to the village, my dad had an accident with us girls in the car, but it was just a small fender bender, so he brought us the rest of the way in. And then we rode the horse and carriage. After we were married, we rode the horse and carriage back to the main gate and had to get in the car, and at that time it poured rain, a thunderstorm. We had to go to the photographers and have our pictures taken. And this is the picture of all of us. You want me to tell their names? This is my husband, Chuck, his best friend, Bill Oranger, his brother, Jack Kalbfleisch, and my brother, Donald Heller. This was my friend, Marion Keeney, who I worked with, Marie Benchick, who I went to school with, and Frances Pulver from Dundee, Michigan. And in those days, that was a big wedding because the Depression really hit people hard. And you ask what my favorite wedding present was. It was a bedroom set my mother and dad bought us. And we didn't get too many gifts because, like I say, people didn't have very much money in those days. We were all hardworking people. I have a peach wedding gown that was the first year that they came out with colored wedding gowns. I bought it at Winkleman's in East Dearborn on Michigan Avenue.
And where was your reception?
I was standing on a box because I'm so much shorter than my husband was. So they just stood me on a box. The reception was at Burt Hall on Lasher Road and Outer Drive. And there was no liquor served at all, except my dad set up a bar in the men's John for those who drank. And that's our first baby. But, you know, here he's in uniform too, and that's before we had the baby. That was when he went into the service. Franklin Delano Roosevelt was the president of the United States. He was president when the war broke out, and he came on the radio with this speech, "Mothers of America, I promise you, your sons will not go overseas." But they did. This is a picture and a replica of Martha Mary Chapel, where I was married. This was given to me as a gift at my 40th wedding anniversary in Cheryl's backyard. Cherry Hill Baptist Church, we started at Clara Bryant's school in the auditorium. And then we rented the Martha Mary Chapel that Henry Ford built from the Baptist people. And they put it on the corner of Wilson and Gully Road. I was baptized on Williamson Avenue Baptist Church in the East Dearborn, right near Fortson High School. It was like Martha Mary Chapel. It was a white Martha Mary Chapel. Later, the church moved to Chase Road and Ford Road, and they built a big church and called it Calvary Baptist Church. And that was where my son Bill was baptized, while the other kids were all baptized at Cherry Hill Baptist Church. And Chuck. Chuck was full grown. He got baptized. My biggest regret was I never opened a business of my own with my idea was to have all homemade arts and crafts type of business. And I never got to do that. We looked, but never did it. Is carrot pudding. Now, some of the family like it, some of them don't. And we renamed it Christmas pudding because of the ingredients that were in it. And we only had it at Christmas and Thanksgiving because it takes so long to make. And so for all you girls that want the recipe, I have written them in my cookbooks, and there are cookbooks galore. The reason we used to serve chipped beef at showers was because it was easy to make, fast to make, and you weren't away from your guests. So you made it with chipped beef, cut it up into pieces, milk, butter, flour, and green peas. And sometimes I add hard-boiled eggs.
And what did you pour it over?
Biscuits. We made it, and we would put it over biscuits.